Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. My name is Martij. I am a 25-year-old South African attorney who moved to the Netherlands at the beginning of this year. Today's video is one I have been looking forward to for quite a while. Today I'm going to be giving a brutally honest review of life living in the Netherlands. Please note that we've only lived here for about 4 months, so I don't think this is like a final review. This is more like a initial impressions review, and I've divided my thoughts into 2 main segments. The first one is the good and the second one is the challenges. Also, I just want to preface this video with the fact that these are of course just my own personal opinions and experiences coming from South Africa to the Netherlands, so please bear in mind that I have moved from a third world country to a first world country, so that is obviously what the majority of my experiences will be based on. And also, if you feel differently from me, please don't be shy to share it in the comments. So without further ado, we're gonna get right into it. Let's go. So first up, the good. The good for me is all about quality of life, and quality of life has 3 main components. You have your physical, you have your mental, and your social. And honestly, so far, my expectations on all 3 aspects have been met and exceeded. Physically, the Netherlands is a place where physical activity is incorporated into everyday aspects. For example, I walk to the grocery store, I take a small run to my rock climbing gym because everything is very accessible and flat, so it's not too tough to get around. I think it's a very healthy and important part of a lifestyle that you're able to move during your day and not just sedentary or driving from point A to point B like I used to in South Africa. So I think that's a big plus for us here. I have spoken in more detail about this in my Why We Moved to the Netherlands video, so please don't be shy to check that one out after this. So I'd also say that it seems like the general lifestyle here is a lot more healthy than in South Africa. I haven't really met a person around my age who doesn't go to the gym or doesn't partake in some type of team sport, so it's a really nice and refreshing change that everybody is pretty interested and invested in their health and well-being. I also want to add a really big component for me, which is both physical as well as mental, is the safety that I've experienced here. In the 4 months that I've lived here, I haven't felt unsafe even once, which is unfortunately a really stark contrast to how my days were spent in South Africa. I can't remember a day that I have lived in South Africa where I wasn't worried about my safety and concerned for my well-being. I've noticed that since not having to worry about my safety so often, I have had so much personal space opened up in my mind. I just have time now to think about other more uplifting and upbuilding things. I honestly feel like my personality has maybe even changed in that regard. It's made me a warmer person to strangers, a little bit more trusting, a little bit more friendly. I'm more likely to engage with new people, whereas in the past, if someone comes around, you kind of just want to keep to your own and get to your destination as quickly as possible. And that's been so amazing, and I smile about that every single day. Hello everyone, this is future editing me. I've been going through the footage and I feel like I've not done it justice. I want to tell you a story of what happened to me while I was working in Cape Town. As you know, I am an attorney and part of my job encompassed having to go to high court a lot. On one particular day, I went out walking and I wasn't as focused as I usually would be because I had just received my wedding photos, and this was about a month into my working in Cape Town, and I actually got assaulted. They tried to rip my graduation gift necklace off of my neck while I was standing in the middle of the day, 30 meters from the entrance to my firm, and I managed to get it and managed to escape the situation. But ever since that happened, I just felt so unsafe walking around and working in that area. It took up so much energy and space in my mind. Every day that I walk alone here is kind of like a really positive experience for me. Probably, if I'm being really honest, the best part of the move here for me. Also, on the mental component, I was really fortunate to do this move with a really amazing, supportive and communicative husband and partner, and I think that makes a really big difference in terms of how you experience life here. It's been quite important to have someone there who's just a confidant and someone who's understanding exactly what you're going through and is supporting you in the ways that you need. There is a saying in Dutch, which I recently learned because I am in Dutch lessons at the moment, but it goes something like gedeelde smart is gehalveerde smart, which translates to shared misery is half misery, and I definitely think having a partner in crime when it comes to something like this makes it a lot more fun and lighthearted. The third and final component of quality of life is social. And if I'm being really honest, this was probably the component that I was most worried about, coming here and not knowing anyone, having to make new friends from scratch. Moving to a foreign country, you are kind of aware beforehand of the fact that making new friendships is probably going to be very slow in the beginning. And I also had some people point out in other videos that knowing 1 or 2 South Africans who live here isn't necessarily going to be enough to meet that social expectation or need that you have. And I just want to say that I am so pleasantly surprised by how wrong I was. I feel like being an expat automatically makes you part of a community that comprises of the best aspects of humanity. And I'm not just talking about South Africans, I'm kind of talking about anybody who is an expat. There is a sense of camaraderie and understanding and banding together because you're in this situation together. But people are so friendly and we've already started to make some great new friends. So I'm very thankful in that regard. But I will also say South Africans are a different breed. We really just stick together in a way that I hadn't anticipated or expected. I did not think upon my moving here that I would be friends with more South Africans than Dutch people, but that seems to be the case. I've been so busy making new friends, reconnecting with old ones, getting to know acquaintances. It feels like my social calendar hasn't really dropped in terms of its busyness since moving this side because everyone is so keen to make friends and to have things to do. So yeah, I definitely say I've made friends. They're just not as Dutch as I'd hoped to be. I will say though that I do intend on infiltrating the Dutch. I've kind of noticed, and I can also really understand this, that if you don't speak Dutch, then it's going to be a little bit harder to crack a friendship circle. I mean, if I think back to South Africa, if you're in a group of Afrikaans speaking people, it's not that it's inconvenient, but it is a little bit more easy to speak with someone who's also Afrikaans as opposed to everyone in the group having to switch over to English. So I think that's probably a barrier to friendships, and that is why I'm enrolled in a class. So the next factor I'm going to discuss is how small and how easy it is to get around the Netherlands. First of all, for those of you who don't know, the Netherlands is a pretty small country. You can basically travel from the one side to the other in I think around 3 hours, which is really quick. And what that means for us living here is you really get the opportunity to get to know your entire country without having to sit in a car for 10 hours or without having to board a flight domestically. And it's been really nice for us going out and tasting different spots in the Netherlands over the weekends, which is completely possible even just for the day because everything is so conveniently close. Each city has its own unique and distinct personality and charm, and it's really nice to get to know the different vibes. Furthermore, everything is pretty accessible, especially if you have a OV-chip card, which is a card that you use to board the train in the Netherlands, and especially if you have a subscription for the weekend free package, which means that you basically get to go where you want in the Netherlands for free over the weekends. My personal favorite spot that I've stopped at so far was definitely Den Haag. I went to vote there for our South African national election, and we went to Scheveningen. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, but the beach right by Den Haag, and I was so impressed by it. It was so nice and warm, and it didn't really feel like the Netherlands. So that was a really amazing experience. Up next, we have the challenges. I think in life, it's unrealistic to expect something to be purely good or purely bad. So of course, with a change like this, there are going to be components that are more like challenges. The first challenge that really stands out for my husband and I is definitely our access to nature. Coming from South Africa, which I think is very well known for its picturesque mountains and beaches and wine farms and just trails to run over the weekend, I think the biggest shock has probably been the lack of those resources and also to get used to the flatness. Back in South Africa, on every available weekend, my husband and I would be out in the mountain, hiking a new route or running a new trail, and almost every day that the weather was warm enough, we would be in the ocean. And in summer, that would be every day, and in the winter, that would be probably every third or fourth day. But I will say that the beautiful parks and the rivers flowing through them are definitely a consolation prize, but that is probably the physical thing that has been the hardest to adjust to. The second challenge, which I don't think is a surprise, is the fact that you are far from family and friends. And I know I said earlier that I've made a lot of new friends here, but I think sometimes you are lonely for a specific type of people only, and that is usually like your closest friends and your closest family. And of course, not being able to be near them, especially when things happen, like for example, death in the family, which we recently had, it's unfortunately pretty tough to be so far away. I will also say that I am really close with my family, and missing milestones like birthdays or seeing my nephews grow up, it's quite sad, but consolation prize again. At least we now have things like FaceTime and video call and WhatsApp, which make you feel a lot more connected, and I still feel like I know what's going on in everyone's lives, even though I'm sitting 12,000 kilometers away. The last thing I'll also say on that is the move here kind of creates a vacuum in which you exist, where nobody who's still living in South Africa can really relate to you or understand what you're going through. And that kind of creates distance in a very unexpected way. I didn't think that would happen. That's also been an interesting thing to navigate, trying to stay relatable to the people living there when you're going through very different problems. Over there, they're complaining about water being off for 8 hours on end or not having power for 4 hours on end. complain, and this side we complain about how bad the weather is or the lack of nature, which I think are two completely different planets to be living on. Staying relatable and just trying to find connection points has been really important, but also quite challenging, I will say. Third is taxes. And listen, I don't really think I should be complaining, because coming from South Africa, where you pay 45% tax on income and don't see anything for it, is really demoralizing. So at least here, when you pay tax, you can actually see where it goes. Like, the Netherlands always has power. None of their roads, as far as I have seen, have potholes, and yeah, basically everything is working the way that it should. But I will say that one challenge for us has been how expensive it is to own a car. We've considered getting one, but it is so expensive to have a car, especially a car that isn't an e-car, which we don't want. I feel like they add extra tax on that. Someone please correct me in the comments. I think you'll definitely know more. We've postponed that until we feel like it's absolutely necessary, and we've remained on the trains. I think that is the Netherlands' tactic. They purposefully want to deter people from getting their own cars and rather making use of the public transportation. So I guess it's a pro and a con, because I'm really grateful for the public transportation that there is, but we were quite surprised by how expensive those taxes were. The final challenge can hardly be a surprise to anyone either, and that is the weather. I will say that in general, because I was so thoroughly warned about how horrible the weather is here, that I wasn't too disappointed when I got here, but I will still say that the weather as a whole is a challenge to get used to, because it's not like it really ever rains outrageous downpours for days on end. It's just constantly wet. That's the best way to describe it. There's always this little drizzle hanging out, and I think that gets taken used to, especially when you come from a country that is really privileged in getting sunshine. But let's also face it, Northern Europe isn't known for its picturesque weather, and I knew this when I was signing up for the move, so it's hardly something that I complain about. It's just more something that takes some getting used to. You can actually feel the deficiency in vitamin D, and we are taking supplements for it. In conclusion, I think it's really important to note that in this world where you have really little control about a lot that goes on, one of the few things that you are always in absolute control over is yourself and the things that you think. You may not be able to change the situation that you are in, but you are able to change how you react to it. So I think it's really important before you make a move like this to have a very serious conversation about the type of person you want to be towards yourself and the types of things you're going to choose to focus on. If you come into something like this already being miserable, already saying it's going to be awful, then you can hardly be surprised if it isn't a massive success. And on the contrast, if you come into it just being hopeful and positive and finding small joys in every day, it's likely to be a bigger success, and good things are more likely to come across your way. And also, don't be shy to see a therapist if you want someone to give you tools on how to improve the way that you talk to yourself or the way that you perceive life. And I can honestly say in final comments that the past couple of months have really been some of the best months of my entire life. And I don't want you to romanticize my life. There have been serious setbacks during this move, disappointments and even heartbreak. As I mentioned, death in the family. Power is all up here, and it's all up to you on what you choose to make of it. Alright, so that's the end of this video. If you're still here, you might as well like and subscribe down below to join this really cool family of super friendly people. And I hope you have a lovely day, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!